With Intel's latest 9th generation series of processors, and the really strong lineup that they have in terms of processors, especially with the 9600K and the 9700K, which offer a really great balance in terms of price to performance and outstanding overclocking capability, there's always a lot of discussion and inquiry as to what's the right motherboard to really pair up with these processors to enable not only a great overclocking experience, but really a great build experience altogether. And that's really where the STRIX series of motherboards come into play. These boards are positioned directly underneath our formal ROG series of motherboards, and they really hit that sweet spot in terms of their overall design, features, and functions. They feature a lot of ROG-derived technology to really offer them kind of that next-level gamer performance, as well as advanced enthusiast-class features, whether you're talking about overclocking, cooling and connectivity, improvements in audio networking, and also have some awesome aesthetics. For all, these are really going to make a great foundation for these next-generation Z390 series builds. And we're going to be talking about two of these boards from the STRIX series with the Z390-E and -I. So first things first, let's talk a bit about the aesthetics for these boards. The overall look and feel is really key in this segment of boards. A lot of users don't necessarily want to spend a huge amount, but they still really want to have a great looking board. And for both of these, you're really going to follow the design cues and convention that we've had in previous generation ROG and STRIX series motherboards. That means that they look great with RGB lighting on, as well as the RGB lighting off. Now, you're going to talk about these boards both featuring a monochromatic color scheme, meaning there's no fixed colors to contend to compete with the look and feel of your build. Now, for both of these boards, you're also going to have some secondary kind of contrast points, and these are going to be included by the form of our CyberText finish patterns. These give a nice little contrast to the overall look and feel of the system and the more subdued color tones which are present on both of these boards. We take a look at the larger board in the -E. The -E kind of takes this a little bit to a higher level where both the ROG Ai as well as the actual CyberText pattern finish illuminate. So this board has two integrated RGB lighting zones, really allowing you to have a little bit more kind of a specific style to your system once you go ahead and integrate that RGB lighting. Now for the -I, if you're interested in the integrated RGB lighting, you've got a side profile lighting design. And that really is soft and subdued, but works well, especially for mini ITX builds where it's harder to be able to see any type of central lighting which might be present physically on the board. For those of you who are looking to be able to kind of take the look and feel to the next level and be able to leverage accessories, whether you're talking about, of course, DRAM, graphics cards, LED strips, fans, chassis with LED lighting, or any of the number of other items that are available in the ASUS Aura RGB ecosystem, you can utilize the ASUS Aura RGB headers which are on these boards. For the -E, you're going to be talking about 3 headers in total, with of course support for standard 5V as well as 12V RGB enabled devices. And on the -I, you've got 2 headers, once again supporting 5V and 12V. Moving from aesthetics, let's talk a bit about the overall performance-oriented design of these motherboards. The performance-oriented design really breaks down to be able to ensure that you get a great experience, whether you're talking about overclocking the CPU or the actual DRAM on these boards. And that's because the outstanding overclocking capability of these 9th gen series of processors is really key in terms of the overall focus that we have when we're designing and developing these STRIX series motherboards. So for both these boards, first and foremost, they feature a very impressive VRM design. The VRM is the voltage regulation modules, or the power componentry that essentially provides power to the CPU when you overclock it. Now, when you talk about performance-oriented design, it doesn't just end with the power components that you implement. There's a lot of other aspects that play into influencing the overall reliability, the stability, and really the margins you have available to you when you talk about the performance levels that the board can reach. So some other key areas that we've looked at are also going to be how we can actually manage the VRM. And this is critical because we implement a digital power design. This means that we have extensive options that are available to you within the UEFI or within the operating system that really allow you to kind of go ahead and intelligently tune the VRM so that you get the best balance between temperature as well as output in terms of power. If you don't want to worry about any of these options, you don't have need. We also intelligently implement what we call auto rules, which help to automatically set all these parameters of operation so that you can ensure that you get a great experience, however you approach overclocking on these boards. In addition to this, we also have a high design in terms of the power phase rating for the DRAM. This is extremely important because on more entry-level boards, you generally see a 1-phase design for DRAM. But for our boards, we've gone ahead and implemented a 2-phase power design. This is important because we generally are seeing users now approaching higher frequencies with the DDR4 kits that they're putting into these more mid-range builds. So you're starting to see 3600 to 4000 megahertz becoming a more common option amongst users. In addition to that, with the demands that you have from additional power requirements from RGB memory, it's important that you ensure a high level of power output capability for the DRAM implementation. Now specifically for Z390, we've also gone back to the drawing board in terms of overall physical design for what's referred to as the trace layout on these motherboards. Trace layout really heavily affects a couple of things in terms of not only the speed of the memory that can be supported on the motherboard, but its overall interoperability and compatibility. ASUS spends a huge amount of time to test more memory modules than any other memory manufacturer out there on the market. And for these STRIX boards, regardless of the memory vendor that you pick, you're going to be able to get a great experience. But for this generation specifically, we've gone ahead and re-implemented a new technology that we call OptiMem, but we've gone ahead and improved it with OptiMem version 2. This design implementation essentially goes ahead and takes the trace layout to a whole nother level where we have an actual dedicated ground plane, and we also go ahead and separate the layers where we actually pass through the memory traces across the PCB. This helps to improve ultimately the signal performance. And what this ultimately means is that you're just going to be able to go ahead and run higher frequency memory kits on these boards. So where in previous generations you generally saw more limits introduced at 3800 or 4000 megahertz, you can begin to see excess of 4000 megahertz or even 4200 megahertz memory kits on both of these motherboards. And something really special for the -I motherboard is that it's the first motherboard in the entire industry to feature a new specialized double DIMM design support. So where on most motherboards you're generally looking at a limit of, let's say, 16 gigabyte DIMMs, the -I will actually support a brand new set of memory modules that were co-developed with G.Skill. These new 32 gigabyte DIMMs can be installed on this board at high frequencies, allowing you to essentially have a 64 gigabyte memory configuration on a mini ITX-based motherboard. Now last but not least is something that probably a lot of you might overlook when you physically look at the motherboard, but that's going to actually be the physical CPU power connections. For this generation, we've maintained an improved power connection that we've introduced previously on ROG motherboards, as well as our workstation series of motherboards called our Pro-Cool Power design. This essentially uses a thicker internal pin or wiring for the actual power connections. This helps to improve overall thermal performance and current output, so essentially allowing us to maximize the current delivery that's provided from your power supply to the CPU. Once again, working with all the other improvements to really be able to ensure a great overclocking experience. Now, equally as important as the overall power design and the power components that are utilized on the board is going to be the way that you've actually cooled those power components. And for this generation, we've really carefully looked at trying to maximize the overall thermal performance for the overall VRM itself, so that you can feel confident when you approach overclocking and when you're really having much heavier loads on your system. So what have we done? A couple of things. First and foremost is going to be the heat sinks themselves. These are high performance, large heat sinks with a lot of surface area, a lot of points of contact. And ultimately, this really helps to make sure that you get effective, solid heat dissipation. For the -E, you actually have two large heat sinks with, like I said, a lot of fins, a lot of surface area to really be able to be effective at pulling away heat. For the -I, you've got a large heat sink with multiple fin points, a lot of surface area, again, to be able to pull that heat away from the VRM components. What's new, especially compared to the previous generation, is that both these heat sinks make direct contact with two different points of the VRM itself. One is going to be for the actual power stages, and another is going to be for the inductors themselves. In traditional designs, you only make contact with just the power stages, but not with the inductors. On both of these boards, we're making contact with both, so we actually have thermal pads which are on the underside of the actual VRM heatsinks themselves that really help to maximize pulling away heat from both these components and improving the overall thermal efficiency for the VRM array. Now, in addition to this, you also have an additional level of cooling that's possible on the -E motherboard, as it features an included fan mount, so that if you want to go ahead and put in your own fan to directly blow air on top of the actual VRM heatsink itself, you can take that cooling to the next level. Now, moving beyond the VRM components that we've talked about, the overall power design, and of course how we're cooling those power components, we also want to talk about how these boards can really help to ensure that you get a great overclocking experience for these latest 9th gen series of parts. And what we've done for this generation is really introduce a whole brand new way that you can easily and effectively overclock your system. This is done through our AI optimization OC options. Now, these are available both in the UEFI as well as within the operating system, and they're very easy to execute. Essentially, all you need to do is take in your K-series part, drop it into the board, and go ahead and post into the actual UEFI BIOS, or go ahead and jump into the operating system. Once you do that, you want to go ahead and start the wizard. It'll provide to you some baseline information on essentially what you need to do. And it's very simple. All you really need to do is run a game or an application for an extended period of time, or even go ahead and run a stress test, all at stock. What we're going to do at that time is we're going to track the temperatures for your system, and this will be, of course, unique to your system. So regardless of the cooler you have, whether it's a heat sink, a closed loop water cooler, or a custom loop, of course, all that information is going to be tracked in real time. Once we have a sense essentially of the thermal performance for your system, we go ahead and provide that to our essentially our hardware and our firmware that we have, and we'll go ahead and define a custom overclock specific to your CPU and to your overall cooling configuration. From there, you click the next button, it'll apply the overclock, and you're good to go. You now have a specific overclock that's been defined for your system that is stable and reliable. Now, for you manual enthusiasts out there that are maybe looking to really dial in all your specific parameters, you still actually have a lot of benefit from this AI optimization technology that we have present. We can actually provide you a full guide that shows you not only target voltages for AVX and for non-AVX ratios, recommendations for cache ratio and cache ratio voltage, and that's all available to you into the UEFI. In addition to this, if you go ahead and define your own multiplier, it changes in real time to allow you to go ahead and see target recommendations. For instance, you'll see a different set of voltages that are recommended at maybe, let's say, 4.8 gigahertz that you might see as opposed to 5.1 gigahertz. And wrapping all of this up is going to be the fact that this actual AI technology is continual in nature in terms of the recommendations and the adjustments that it can implement. In fact, let's say if you see changes in, let's say, your ambient temperature or potentially reductions in your cooling performance, the actual AI technology will dynamically adjust the clock speeds and bring them down to be able to help to ensure that they're in alignment with essentially the new levels of cooling performance that your system is now operating at. If you're really talking about the level of overclocking capability that these boards offer, it's really unmatched, and it really helps to ensure that you get a great experience when you're dropping in whatever K-series part that you are. Beyond CPU overclocking, a lot of you are going to be, of course, interested in easily and effectively overclocking your DRAM, and that can easily be accomplished on both these boards. All you need to do is essentially jump into the UEFI and enable our Easy XMP option, which can be found in either the Easy mode interface or the Advanced mode interface. On both of these, essentially, regardless of whatever XMP kit that you drop in, just enable the profile. That will automatically apply your XMP values, and you'll be good to go. Now, for this generation, we've also gone ahead and enabled a really cool additional function that you'll find on the Dash E board, and that's going to be our MemOK2 technology. Essentially, what this does is on a hardware level, it monitors how the memory is initializing, so that potentially if you go ahead and install your memory, and when the board essentially notices that the memory is not initializing correctly and the system is not powering on correctly, we can make some subtle adjustments to things like frequency, timings, and voltages, helping to find the right parameters so that the system will essentially be able to power on correctly, so that you can go ahead and either make additional adjustments inside the UEFI, update to a newer BIOS which resolves maybe compatibility issues, or potentially run a memory test and check to see if you have a faulty kit of memory. Either which way, this type of implementation really helps to ensure that you can maintain a much easier level of overall operation and improve the experience that you have when you go about building your system, especially when it comes to memory. Now, moving beyond overclocking, let's talk a bit about the overall cooling and controls that are going to be offered on these boards. So this is a really important part of any type of build because, of course, being able to effectively manage all of the different types of fans and the overall cooling implementations that you have in your system is really important. Not only being able to maintain quieter operation, but effective cooling operation. So let's dive into what makes these boards special. Well, first and foremost, they feature, of course, our Fan Xpert IV technology. This means you have really extensive and robust level of connectivity and control. All the headers that are present on here essentially allow you to have both support for 3-pin fans as well as 4-pin fans, so that means DC or PWM. PWM output support is great because that gives you a lot of granularity and control, so that if you want to be able to go ahead and output, let's say via a PWM fan splitter cable, you can have multiple fans that are controlled just from one single header. This is great for, let's say, grouped intake fan configurations or, let's say, radiator fan configurations where you want that same type of control signal. Having the ability to have this uniquely applied to every single header also gives you a lot of flexibility, especially when you have different types of fans that are set up in your system. This is fairly common because you might have fans that came with your cooler, then fans that came with the chassis, and then maybe additional fans that you added into your system. In fact, we have a way to really simplify the entirety of this experience when you talk about customizing the controls for all these different types of fans, and that's going to be in our fan calibration and profiling. You can jump into the operating system or you can jump into the UEFI. Both offer actually fan calibration and profiling through an easy-to-use wizard, where we can actually figure out the minimum and the maximum speeds for every single one of these fans. Once the calibration is complete, you can actually even go into the software, name the actual fan header so you know where the fans are located. You can control the ramping speed so that you can make sure that the fans actually, let's say, ramp up in a smoother or more acoustically pleasing fashion. You can go ahead and customize a specific fan curve. You have truly a huge amount of flexibility to be able to make sure that the fans work exactly the way you want them to. Now, beyond this, you also have a lot of flexibility to be able to define how the fans are responding to you. And what I mean by this is that traditionally on most motherboards, the fans are going to respond to a single temperature input source. And traditionally this has been the CPU. But actually in most situations, if you actually check your CPU temperature, especially when you're gaming, you'll find that the CPU is generally comfortably running at a fairly low temperature. In most situations, this is probably between 45 to 60 degrees. While if let's say you check, let's say the temperature for your graphics card, it might be actually running quite a bit hotter, maybe between 70 to maybe over 80 degrees. In this respect, you'd actually might want your fans to respond to that temperature source as opposed to the CPU. And for both these motherboards, you actually do have this ability. It's called temperature input mapping. This means that different headers can be assigned to different temperature sources, and this can be all managed easily and effectively, once again, either in the UEFI or within the software suite. Now, in addition to the Fan Xpert IV technologies that we talked about, if you're looking for even more connectivity and control, the -E definitely offers this, and this comes in the form of two specific headers. One is going to be the fan extension header. This header allows you to go ahead and purchase the optional fan extension card, where once you plug this into the board, you have 3 additional fan connect headers that are available to you so that you can go ahead and connect, again, 3-pin or 4-pin fans, 3 additional temperature input sources. It's also a great option for users that are out there that care a little bit more about cable routing, as you can go ahead and have more flexibility at where you mount the actual fan extension card. And you also have a lot of flexibility in terms of those temperature input sources, which can be read, again, either within the UEFI or within the BIOS. This is great for users that might have maybe complex storage configurations where you might have, let's say, multiple hard drives or maybe different types of M.2 configurations, and you want your fans to potentially respond to those temperature points. Now, beyond this, we also have a brand new connector for this generation called the node header. The node header is a new specialized header which has been made to work with not only ASUS accessories, but also partner accessories that are going to be coming to the market. A couple of examples of this might be certain types of power supplies that can interface directly with this header so that you can go ahead and monitor direct types of voltages, fan speeds, and other aspects of operation, as well as actually control elements of operation for, let's say, that power supply. For things like CPU coolers, you'll be able to, of course, see all this real-time information and also make control adjustments. Or for certain chassis, you might actually have a direct interface cable that allows you to go ahead and see all the operating metrics, say CPU frequency, voltages, or fan speeds, or other parameters by leveraging this node header. Now, moving beyond cooling, let's go ahead and talk about 2 key areas that I think are really important to a lot of gamers, as well as actually just in general to PC DIY builders, and that's going to be audio networking. Now, audio has always been a focus on ASUS motherboards and definitely on any ROG series motherboard. In fact, ROG boards were the first ones to implement isolated audio paths, which have now really become kind of the industry standard for gaming-centric based motherboards. And both of these boards feature our SupremeFX audio design. That means you have a full isolation audio path that's present. That helps to go ahead and minimize any type of signal interference, which could be affecting, causing hissing or pop or other type of noise that you might get in terms of the audio output on the board. You also, of course, have a shielded S2-1220 audio codec, which is an extremely high-performance audio codec. This codec also has an improved line-level input. This is great, especially if you're using an analog microphone, as you're going to get an improved level of performance for that microphone. You're also going to have other areas that are improved upon on a hardware level, like audio-grade capacitors, which help to improve the overall tonality and warmth that you have, so that you get a, let's say, an overall improved experience in both music, movies, and games. You've got an operational amplifier, which has been built on board to help to really punch up the overall sound stage and improve and increase the overall volume levels that you can have, especially on headphones. In addition to this, we also have our Sonic Sense impedance detection. This is really cool because essentially, regardless of which headsets you have or headphones, you can plug these in and the board will essentially automatically detect what's the right amount of output power for those headphones. So that if you want to be able to make sure that you're getting that best experience possible for your headphones, just got to plug them in, click OK to the prompt, and you're good to go. Now, beyond this, there's some other areas of improvements that we also have gone and incorporated. And these include things like a depop filter, which is great because if you have connected speakers on your system, you're always worrying about that pop that you're going to hear when you reboot your system. Beyond this, you also have our Sonic Studio 3 software suite. Now, this is a really extensive suite and it covers a lot of functions and features, but some of the key things are, one is going to be the ability to apply unique profiles per different games or applications. Take, for instance, if you want to go ahead and have a customized EQ for, let's say, music playback and, let's say, running Spotify, you can do that, but at the same time, you might not want those EQ parameters applied to when you jump into Overwatch or Call of Duty. In this respect, you can go ahead and customize all these different parameters unique to specific applications or specific games. You also have the ability to apply post-processing and upmixing, so that if you want to apply, let's say, a virtual surround to, let's say, your stereo speakers or your stereo headphones, you have that ability. And if you're also looking to improve the clarity, the tonality for both incoming and outgoing microphone audio, this is also something you can easily do within the Sonic Studio 3 interface. Now, going hand in hand with audio is actually going to be networking. It's critical to be able to have a great networking experience, whether you're going to be gaming, whether you're going to be downloading, streaming, whatever it might be. And in this respect, both these boards definitely offer you a great experience. Now, if we talk about the key networking specifications, these boards definitely have you covered. You've got first and foremost an Intel Gigabit Ethernet. Now, this is really the industry standard amongst the community. Users really appreciate the consistent performance, the UDP performance that you have, which is especially critical for online games, as well as the robust management options which are available in the Intel driver. Now, beyond this, we've also gone ahead and updated the actual Wi-Fi controller for this generation so that users that are looking to be able to take advantage of wireless connectivity really have outstanding throughput performance as well as low latency. Now, in our previous generation, we already had top performing 802.11ac 2x2 wireless implementations. Now, what's new for this generation? You have the same 2x2 802.11ac, but a new chipset from Intel that aims to enable multi-user MIMO support as well as 160 megahertz channel operation. Now, the 160 megahertz channel operation is going to be dependent on a compatible router, but if you've got a compatible router, the really impressive part is that you'll see significantly improved overall throughput. Furthermore, if you utilize our Game First packet priority software, you've got a lot of ability to be able to customize the overall network-centric experience. And what I mean by that is that if you want to define different connections and different applications to different ports, you can do that essentially through the Game First software. So maybe if you're streaming on Twitch and you want to leverage your hardline connection, but then maybe you want to have your game connection utilizing the Wi-Fi connection, you can go ahead and divvy that up. Now, if you also want to be able to help to ensure that you're easily and effectively prioritizing whatever applications you have running on your system, whether they're games or applications, to make sure you get a smooth and reliable network experience, you also have that available to you within Game First. You can easily go ahead and set whatever application you want, whether that's your browser, whether that's your streaming program, or whether it's your game, to be able to receive the highest level of prioritization. If you don't want to have to click any application or prioritize anything, just leave Game First in its automatic mode. This will work in real time and connect to our servers, which already have analysis for thousands of different types of applications and games, and will automatically prioritize whatever is there in the foreground to make sure you get a consistent, smooth, and overall great connected experience. And for those of you out there that are ASUS router owners that are currently benefiting from our quality of service optimizations, which we bake into those routers, we've got a real treat for you with Game First 5. You now have the ability to have Game First 5 talk directly to your router and automatically set your motherboards as the actual primary device to receive the best overall throughput and the overall lowest latency. This is an exclusive option that really helps to just show that the network and connected experience that you have with STRIX series motherboards that feature Game First 5 and ASUS routers take your connected experience to a whole nother level. Taking things even further, these STRIX series boards both feature integrated I/O shields. While this is a huge convenience to you in terms of not having to remember to put the I/O shield in your system, actually having it pre-mounted on the board significantly improves its EMI and ESD performance. Again, this helps to provide you a high level of reliability and durability. So now that we've gone ahead and covered really, I think, a lot of the key features and functions that we've got on this board, there might be some of you that are still, of course, interested in the key specifications. Now, these are, of course, modern Z390-based chipset boards, and of course, they're ASUS boards. So really, all the key specifications you could ask for are going to be present here. But to quickly recap on, let's say, key specifications that a lot of you might have interest in, let's go ahead and check these off. First and foremost, if you're interested in M.2 support, both of these boards are going to have you covered. You got full support for PCIe Gen 3 by 4-based M.2. In fact, both of these motherboards, even the Dash-I, have 2 M.2 slots. In addition to this, we also have gone ahead and implemented M.2 heatsinks. One M.2 heatsink on the Dash-I, and no heatsink is required for the secondary M.2 slot, which is on the back of the motherboard. On the Dash-E, you still have 2 M.2 heatsinks so that you can help to ensure maximum performance possible for the fastest M.2 drives. Beyond that, of course, you've got your traditional SATA ports. You have physical by 16 PCI slots, for, of course, for your graphics cards. S-Line Crossfire being supported on the Dash-E variant. For users that care, of course, about USB connectivity, of course, you've got USB 3.1 and USB 3.1 Gen 2 based connectivity available to you on both of these boards. You have Type A and Type C connectors that are also available to you. And on both of these boards, while it might not be something that you're going to be mindful about, they actually do feature internal USB 2 headers. This is extremely important for those of you out there that are going to be utilizing maybe add-in RGB controllers or possibly maybe using USB powered AIO cooler solutions, which require an internal USB 2 header. And for those legacy enthusiasts out there that still utilize a PS2 connection, the Dash-E has you covered. So wrapping everything up, we've talked about a lot of different aspects and why these boards are really going to be a great sweet spot foundation for those of you that are looking to build, essentially, I think, a great price to performance ratio that compromises on very little for the latest generation of Z390 based, of course, chipset, and then of course 9th generation series processors. The STRIX boards, I think, give you a great stylized aesthetic, awesome RGB lighting control and connectivity, a really great overclocking experience, whether it's going to be manually or automatically. You also have improvements to audio and networking, and of course class-leading controls and connectivity for fan cooling, and everything else that comes along when you talk about cooling your system. These boards also bake in a lot of supplemental improvements that really help to give you a reliable, durable, and long-term build that you can feel confident in. So if you're really looking to be able to build an awesome sweet spot mid-range gaming build, you're definitely going to check out the latest from the STRIX series of motherboards with the Z390-E and the Z390-I.